If you don't know yet, I'm very passionate about the speculation that Kaeya is half South Asian for many reasons that I've detailed in my last Kaeya-focused video. Go check that out, by the way. And so when I found out that the lore of the Girdle of the Sand sub-region in Sumeru involved some Indian terminology and concepts alongside Persian cultural symbolisms, I thought, now's the time. This is Kaeya's region, I told myself, as I started exploring the region with a huge jug of copium beside me. But alas, you may not be surprised to learn that I haven't found any direct proof to fuel the Desi Kaeya theory, which I believe in wholeheartedly. But it's not a complete loss for Kaeya simps such as myself, because it turns out that some players who had gone through the New World quest in its entirety found a new candidate for the idea of his dad, and his name is Knight Marshal Anfortas of the Schwanenritter. The main detail that really made fans consider him is the note they found where he declared that he was going to take up the post of Marshal Regent due to King Ermin of the Eclipse dynasty being indisposed, leading him to head the Regnum Concilium Ultimum. And you know why that sounds so familiar? Yes, it's because in the Hidden Strife event, we found a mysterious box where Kaeya left some notes, and the one his father taught him how to write states that the Alberics served as regents when the strength of the one-eyed King Ermin failed. And that's huge, right? But honestly, when I heard the speculation, I didn't initially care much for it. Like, I really was just happy that there's a new candidate for Kaeya's dad who isn't Piero or Clothar, simply because as I rambled about last time, neither simply makes sense. Although, upon finding out more about the character of Anfortas, I actually found myself kinda liking him because of how much his character complements Kaeya so well already, even from the few details we know about him. So today, I'm gonna make the case for Anfortas being Kaeya's dad, but not just through trying to align facts, but also through analyzing his character traits, which we can infer from the current information we have. And also, in addition to that, I would like to add my own half-baseless, mildly unhinged, mildly copium theory about Kaeya's mom and how Anfortas being Kaeya's dad could indirectly contribute to the Daisy Kaeya theory. Now let's get into it. Back in my Kaeya lore analysis and speculation video, I made a kind of mini checklist for the characteristics that I inferred Kaeya's dad to possess based on his communication style evident in those notes from Hidden Strife. I said that he's prideful, determined, dutiful, traditional, and meticulous. And boy are these traits apparent in Anfortas from what we know now. Firstly, it's important to note that he was the leader of the Schwanenritter, the Swan Knights from Kaeya who were in charge of piloting the ruined golems and fought the Abyss mainly at Devantaka Mountain. This early, we can already sense his dedication to the defense of Kaeya through his role in the battle and his subsequent regency. We can assert that he's determined and dutiful, then the other traits may follow suit. Especially with the whole traditionalist thing, you can see it in how he really chose to serve King Ermin to preserve what was left of Kaeya instead of simply going by his own ambitions like establishing the Fatui or the Abyss Order. As a regent, he did seem to possess the willingness to step down if King Ermin ends up recovering. And the thing is, he's also very particular about loyalty because of how he offed his fellow Schwanenritter who betrayed them by sabotaging one of the ruined golems. So you can imagine this would be the kind of dad who could scare the crap out of Kaeya without needing to be manipulative necessarily. He could appear strict enough just to make his son worried about possible betrayal, even without needing to alter his perception of reality. Also, when it comes to his rhetoric, remember how Kaeya's father dubbed him as their only hope? Set that thought aside temporarily for now and let me tell you a little bit about this one hidden exploration objective in Sumeru, which I actually haven't completed yet. But basically what you need to do is fill the ruined guards all over the Port Ormos area with energy blocks, and then the ruined guards can give you a message, which can be deciphered using Morse code. Now what comes out still doesn't make sense, but since the title of the achievement is called In the Name of Anfortas, some people have decided to use the Vigenère cipher using the key Anfortas, and resulted with the statement, "We Schwanenritters have fought to the last one." So going back to Kaeya's dad's parting statement, Well, it's not exactly the same as the Schwanenritter statement, but it emphasizes being the last, essentially carrying on with the ambitions of the collective using your own individual strength. It's like the idea that you have to survive on behalf of a lot of people who have died not having their hopes and dreams fulfilled. Very intense, isn't it? It's why I said in my past video that the father seems to impose an interesting kind of pressure onto Kaeya, because he both emphasizes personal power and agency while also kind of forcing him to fulfill a role that was set out for him. It's both empowering and suffocating. He wants Kaeya to develop his own personal strength and integrity while ultimately serving the needs of Kaeya. Although maybe all Kaeya needs to do now is survive, who knows. You could imagine Anfortas to be a similar kind of guy who would say, though we could not restore Kaeya to life, we of the Alberic clan should lead lives as those who blaze like fire rather than those who wallow in the embers. It's also noteworthy that Anfortas is someone who has actually tried to restore Kaeya to life during a most crucial period of time since... Come on, what were Piero and Clothar really doing? Sulking? And if he is indeed Kaeya's dad, I really love how Anfortas still invokes the Alberic clan, even though he seems to be the main guy who became the regent, like he's not only crediting himself but also the collective. He knows he's just one out of many who have served Kaeya in various ways, and he doesn't dare hog all the glory for himself. But aside from Anfortas having a similar personality with Kaeya's dad from those notes, I'd say Anfortas shares a few similarities with Kaeya as well. For one, he's a knight marshal and the head or captain equivalent of a specific faction of the Kaeyan line of defense, just like Kaeya is a captain of the knights. Maybe you can even consider the Ruin Guards to be like a metal cavalry. I don't know. Also, remember how I said Anfortas killed the traitor within the Schwanenritter, whose name was Hadura? Well, it turns out he lost his eye in that confrontation, which mirrored how Kaeya's eye was scarred during his confrontation with Diluc. This might have led Anfortas to use an actual eye patch compared to whatever Dine's Life and Piero have going on with their weird eye masks. Both Anfortas and Kaeya also seem to have a knack for leadership, seeing as how they can lead their individual teams as well as take over the highest positions in the government temporarily to fill in for an indisposed leader. Another interesting link between the two of them might be the Ruin Guards. This may not be true for some of you guys who explored the open world in Genshin first before doing the story quests, but I focused on the quests first since the open world scared me, so my first ever introduction to the Ruin Guard was from Kaeya's story quest, where he seemingly triggered it to corner the treasure hoarders, which is also referenced in his character's stories. This may be a stretch, but I wonder if his comfort with toying with Ruin Guards stems from his dad being a Schwanenritter. But more than all these minor connections, I feel like there's one major implication of Anfortas being Kaeya's dad, and that's the idea that Kaeya is not really aligned with the Abyss, even with his father's influence considered, because the Schwanenritters, except Hadura I think, were ultimately against the Abyss. The abyssal monsters were their greatest enemies, and they fought to the last one in order to stop them. And that's how they even ended up unintentionally working with the Pari as well as Nagarjuna and his Order of the Skeptics, which I'll get into later. And also, these Anfortas and Kaeya comparisons have given me a new perspective on Kaeya's relationship with his father. Before, I used to be really fond of the idea of Kaeya being the total opposite of his father, but now, seeing as how dedicated and full of integrity Anfortas seem to be, I think Kaeya's character might actually be more nuanced in relation to his father. I'm thinking that their personality parallels must be so close to an uncanny extent, but what will ultimately set them apart from each other would be their allegiances. So I can imagine Kaeya being as dutifully dedicated to Mondstadt as much as Anfortas was dutifully dedicated to Kaeya. It might be more meaningful for Kaeya to not shed his Kaeyan upbringing to become a true Mondstadter, but to instead harness his Kaeyan attitudes to better become a public servant of Mondstadt. Ironically, this will allow him to become an Alberic who leads his life as those who blaze like fire, just as his father desired for him. Just as a side note though, I think Anfortas could also be Kaeya's grandfather. As long as they're related, that would be very good already. Or even if Anfortas is not related to Kaeya, I think this theory is still a step in the right direction since Anfortas seems to behave very similar to Kaeya's dad, so this will open up our view of what traits to look for when finding a new candidate. Also to add, I wonder if the reason why Dine's life mentioned the Alberic's connection to the Abyss when speaking to Kaeya instead of their service as regents is he might not be aware of the regency or Anfortas' last name, but if he does know, perhaps he wanted to confront Kaeya harshly in order for him to correct him and say, "No, I'm a descendant of Anfortas actually." I don't think he counted on Kaeya preferring to be viewed as suspicious instead of divulging more of his secrets to defend himself. This might also better explain why Kaeya wasn't way too disturbed by Dine's life's revelation. Well, he was, but not as much as we might expect, right? Okay, so because of what I just rambled on about, I began to be really fond of Anfortas as a character, so I wanted to establish a symbolic connection between him and Kaeya. I noticed that Kaeya is peacock themed while Anfortas was a swan and ritter, a swan knight, so maybe both of them being birds symbolizes something, right? Yeah, when I first floated the idea, I found my own delusions very silly, but I went on to search for swan symbolisms on Google. Then I found a suggestion for swan symbolisms in Hinduism, and since I have a very strong ongoing Desi Kaeya theory, I couldn't help but click on it and I was led to Saraswati, a Hindu goddess of learning and the arts, who is commonly depicted alongside a swan. But I just remembered something. Didn't Saraswati also feature in my Kaeya lore speculation video because of how she's often depicted alongside peacocks? So lo and behold, I found some art of Saraswati which shows her depicted alongside both swans and peacocks. This is insane. I can't believe my delusion somehow led somewhere. At least vaguely, right? But wait, you guys might still find this weird, and I admittedly do as well. Why would Hoyoverse think of connecting Kaeya to his Shvan and Ritter father simply through seeing art of Saraswati, especially since Anfortas is European? That's a valid point, so I thought of reframing the connection in a different way. Basically, I was thinking that perhaps both the peacock and the swan in Saraswati's iconography are meant to represent Kaeya and that Kaeya's swan-like qualities are inherited from his father. Both the peacock and the swan are rather elegant birds, and it's not uncommon for characters to have more than one thing symbolizing them. For example, Diluc is symbolized by both the phoenix and the owl, with his phoenix name card description having ties to his dad. So while that's not the case for Kaeya yet right now, it is possible that he'll get more swan symbolisms later on. He might establish a faction within the Knights and call them the Swan Knights, and it's also possible that his epithet within the Knights is actually the Swan Knight, but we just don't know it yet. I don't know. I mean, it is mildly far-fetched, but think about why Kaeya's fur and cape are on the white side, more resembling swans rather than peacocks. And also do recall the tale of the ugly duckling and its metaphor for being a late bloomer. Obviously, Kaeya was a very pretty right from when he was born, so it's obviously not a physical late blooming, but rather coming into his own as he grows up and allows himself to shine as a unique being, even though it was difficult being different from the other ducklings when he was younger. Anyway, all of this just to say that the Shvan and Ritter swan symbolism and Kaeya's peacock symbolism might go hand in hand, and this could be a sign that he is indeed connected to the likes of Anfortas, one way or another. Now, so we've spent some time discussing Kaeya's father already, but what about his mom? Well, my belief is that she's a mortal who's not Kyrian and had a child with Kaeya's dad, let's say Anfortas in this case, and produced a half-blood Kaeya who can age properly, indicating that he doesn't seem to be affected by the curse. The reason why I believe he's a halfie are more detailed in my previous video, again you can go watch that. But also I would just like to add that even though Hoyoverse doesn't know how to use cultural inspiration properly all the time, sometimes creating borderline problematic character designs and cultural mishmashing for regions like Sumeru. But Hoyoverse is for some reason quite decent at depicting characters with multicultural origins. so I don't think that it's unlikely at all that Kaeya's own bloodline bears multiple heritages, and with that, I have my own theory on Kaeya's mom, which is also kind of reliant on the theory that Anfortas is Kaeya's dad. Now, we all know that Kaeya has an opening near Sumeru, so it's all of a sudden not too weird that Kaeya could be half Sumerian. Well, it was never too weird, but what I mean to say is that it's now a lot more possible for any Kaeyan to father a kid with someone from Sumeru now, especially when it comes to Anfortas. All the information we have of him right now is from Sumeru, which means that he seems to really have spent a lot of time and made a mark there in particular. Now, it is also in Sumeru where we found a group of people who greatly admired the Schwanenritters for their valiant resistance to the abyssal monsters, which the Pari were also fighting against. Thus, this group of people from the academia fought alongside the Pari and the Schwanenritters, thus forming the Order of the Skeptics under their founder Nagarjuna, a very Indian name I would add. Although it doesn't seem like Anfortas continued fighting alongside them as he had to go back to serve as regent, right? But after failing in his duties as a regent, if he decided to spend time in a specific human community in Sumeru and eventually find love, out of all these communities in Sumeru, the most accessible and most welcoming to him would likely be the Order of the Skeptics, since the Schwanenritters have built a reputation among them. Do you see where I'm getting at? Yes, I am delusional enough to believe that Kaeya's mom was a member of the Order of the Skeptics. I think this could even be beneficial to both the Anfortas dad theory and the Desi Kaeya theory. And at the same time, the theory is also quite flexible as it doesn't nullify other speculations you might have about Kaeya's mom yet. For example, if you imagine her to be an academia scholar, then it's also possible for her to still join the Order of the Skeptics later on, since they do seem to actively recruit members. I don't have much other proof for this claim, but I just think it'll be super cool, and to me this supposed backstory does seem highly sensible and plausible. And Kaeya's indirect affiliation with this organization might encourage him to think for himself even more, and maybe even view himself as a righteous protector of both humans and nature. Just, food for thought. Also, just a little wild speculation since there are no clues so far as to what the name of Kaeya's mom could be. But if it is indeed true that Kaeya's name is derived from Kartikeya and that he's meant to parallel the deity in some way, although not in a one-for-one correspondence of course, his mom could be named something along the lines of Parvati, reflecting the name of the Hindu goddess who is also the mother of Kartikeya. If you want to find out more about that connection, again, my previous video details it a bit. Other names for Parvati are also Uma and Gauri, although Gauri means fair, so not so sure about that. She can also take the form of Sati, Durga, and Kali, so if any of those names end up being confirmed as the name of Kaeya's mom, then that basically confirms the Kaeya-Kartikeya link. Although if the mom is named something else, as long as it's Indian, that's still great for us. So in summary, yes, perhaps I am unhinged, and while I don't like theorizing without tons and tons of proof yet, I think it can be fun sometimes. But ultimately, it's not just Kaeya's origin which matters, but what he decides to do with it. And hopefully he will soon find a way to view his family background not as a burden for him to bear, but as something that will allow him to tap into the best parts of himself and become the person he wants to be, defined by his own terms. At the end of the day, he will decide how to value his family background, and seeing that unfold will be very entertaining for us Kaeya simps, wouldn't it? So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video and found yet another thing to fuel your incessant Kaeya brain rots. If you appreciated this take, you can leave a like and comment your 1K word mini essays down below. You can also subscribe to my channel if you like detailed and nuanced analyses like this one. Plus, you can share this if you want to fuel the collective Kaeya brain rot along with your friends. And I'll see you next time.